I mean, who doesn't like cake? Today, I'll be showing you how to make a delicious chocolate cake, flavored with coffee, layered with chocolate ganache, topped with chocolate buttercream. It is, in my opinion, to die for. So tag along and let's get baking. For this recipe, we'll start by mixing our dry ingredients. In a mixing bowl, you want to add 500 grams of sugar, to which you are going to sift into 300 grams of all-purpose flour, 12 grams of baking soda, 8 grams of baking powder, 5 grams of salt, and 150 grams of cocoa powder. Once you've sifted all the dry ingredients into your mixing bowl, you want to give it a little mix to make sure it's well incorporated. Now, let's move on to our wet ingredients. In a mixing bowl, you're going to take 140 grams of soft butter, to which you are going to pour in 220 grams of drip coffee or instant coffee. You want to make sure the coffee is hot so it melts the butter. You're going to whisk it until all the butter has melted. Once there is no lumps of butter left in the mix, you're going to add 285 grams of buttermilk. You want to make sure the buttermilk is at room temperature so it doesn't harden the butter again. You're going to give that a little mixy mix, and once you can't see any traces of buttermilk, you're going to add 3 whole eggs and 2 egg yolks. After that, once again, you're going to whisk the wet mixture until it is well combined and you can't see any traces of eggs. And now it is time to mix our wet and dry ingredients. You're going to take all of your wet ingredients and pour them onto the dry ingredients at once. In this case, there's no need to do 3 additions or anything like that, just all in at once. You are going to whisk the batter until it is very well combined and you can't see any lumps. Don't worry too much about over mixing it. This is such a wet batter that over mixing will not be an issue. See how runny that batter is? That's the way it's supposed to look like. Runny but very, very smooth. Now it's time to prepare our cake pan. We're going to use an 8-inch cake pan for this specific recipe. We are only going to line the bottom of the cake pan with parchment paper and butter the sides. The way we create a perfectly round piece of parchment is by folding a piece of parchment in half, then in quarters, and keep folding all the corners towards the middle, like so. You want to keep folding the parchment paper until it is so thick that you can't fold it anymore. Now we are going to make sure that this is the right size. We are going to take our piece of parchment, place the tip in the middle of the pan, and then we are going to cut right around where the edge of the cake pan is. Right there. Now, I know this is all very boring, but it is very important to line our cake pan properly. Now we are going to extend the piece of parchment and make sure it fits. See that? That's a pretty nice round piece of parchment. Put it down, and I like it when it comes up just a little bit on the edges. We're going to press it down, and that's that. Parchment liner is done. Now we're going to take a little bit of butter and dab it around the edges of the pan. Once all the edge of the pan is covered with butter, we're going to place our piece of parchment down and press all the edges of the parchment paper onto the corners of the cake pan. This is to ensure that no cake batter goes under the parchment. And there you have it. Our cake pan is ready to go. It's time to pour the batter into the cake pan. Here we go. You want to fill your cake pan about 2/3 of the way. You definitely don't want to overfill it, or you'll have to clean up a sticky mess from your oven later on. Once your batter is in, you want to take your cake pan and give it a couple taps just to smooth out the surface. And that's it. The hardest part of this recipe is done. You have your prepared cake pan with cake batter in it, filled about 2/3 of the way in. Now you are going to bake this cake at 350 degrees for about 35 to 40 minutes depending on your oven. And now it's time to make the ganache. In a pot set to medium heat, you are going to add 200 grams of whipping cream and bring it to a gentle simmer. Once the cream is simmering and you can see some bubbles forming around the edges of the pan, you are going to add 200 grams of dark chocolate. Then you are going to start mixing the chocolate in so it starts melting. I'm using the top of a hand blender here to mix the chocolate in because I'm going to hand blend this ganache anyway. Once the chocolate is melted, you want to start blending that ganache and keep moving your hand blender around to make sure there's no chocolate chunks left behind. After about 2 minutes of blending, once your ganache looks nice and smooth, you are going to add 45 grams of butter. One thing I didn't mention before was that the induction burner has been turned off since after the cream came to a simmer. I don't want you burning that ganache of yours. You are going to blend that butter in until it's fully melted and emulsified. And there you have it, a silky, smooth, delicious dark chocolate ganache. At this point you can either transfer your ganache to a mixing bowl or transfer it to a piping bag and let it cool down while our cake bakes and we make our buttercream. At this point our cake should be done, if not it should be close to being done. We are going to take it out of the oven and place it on a cooling rack. You want to cool it down in the cake pan for about half an hour. Once it's cooled down a little bit, you are going to run a spatula along the edge of the cake pan to make sure it's free. Then place a cooling rack on top, give it a flip, and the cake should slide right out. And if it doesn't, you can give it a little tap, but in this case it came out clean. Peel that piece of parchment off and let it cool further. Altogether you want to cool it down for at least an hour. And now it's time to make our buttercream. In the bowl of a stand mixer, you are going to place 220 grams of soft butter. You are going to whip your butter at medium speed for about 5 minutes or until it has changed in color and it's a very pale yellow. Every couple minutes or so, you'll need to stop your mixer and scrape down the sides of the bowl to make sure the butter is whipping evenly. Once your butter looks like this, a very pale yellow, it might take longer than 5 minutes to whip your butter, depending on how soft your butter is to start with and how fast you are whipping it. We are going to start adding our icing sugar. For this recipe, we'll be adding 625 grams of icing sugar. Now you want to make sure your mixer is set to low speed, otherwise your counter is going to be a mess. We will be adding the sugar in 4 additions. We want to make sure the icing sugar is fully incorporated with the butter before we add any more sugar. After we've mixed the first addition of sugar with the butter for about 3 minutes on medium speed, we're going to scrape down the sides of the bowl again, scrape down the whisk, and add the second quarter of the sugar. And we will keep doing this until all of the sugar is incorporated. At this point, your buttercream probably looks more like butter pellets rather than buttercream. But now is the time when we're going to start adding the milk. We're going to add about 125 grams of milk altogether, give or take depending on how loose or thick you want your buttercream. And once again, we're going to do small additions to make sure that our buttercream is smooth before each addition. And I hate to repeat myself, but you really can't forget about scraping down the sides of the bowl and the whisk. After you've added about half of the milk, you want to add 50 grams of cocoa powder and about 10 grams of salt. You're going to again scrape down the sides, give it a good whisk, and keep adding your milk until you are happy with the texture and look of the buttercream. And voila! Your chocolate buttercream is now ready. And there you have it, chocolate buttercream, chocolate cake, chocolate ganache. Time to get building. For this cake, I want 2 layers of filling within the cake. So we are going to start by cutting the top off and making it nice and even on top. Then we are going to cut 2 layers, so we end up with 3 layers of cake and 2 layers of filling. After we've cut our cake, we are going to start piping our ganache. You can definitely spread the ganache with an offset spatula, or whatever is easiest for you. I personally like piping the ganache and turning the cake table because this will guarantee a nice even ganache throughout the whole cake. But whichever method you use, try to get it as smooth as possible. Then we are going to layer the second piece of cake on top and repeat the process with the ganache all over again. In this case, I decided to spread the ganache at the end with an offset spatula to make sure I got it all the way towards the edge. And now, let's put the lid on the cake. Next up, buttercream. Look at me. Does it look like I know how to decorate a cake? That's what I thought. Now there's 1,000 different ways you can decorate a cake, but I personally like keeping my cakes simple. So all I'm gonna do for this guy is spread some buttercream on top, spread some buttercream on the sides of the cake, making sure it's nice and even. And once all the sides of your cake have been completely covered with buttercream, place your spatula against the cake, hold firmly, and spin your cake to create even and straight walls. Then you can smooth out the top of the cake by bringing the buttercream from the sides of the cake to the center and keep turning. Repeat this process until you're fully satisfied with the way your cake looks. And there you have it, the most basic decorated cake you've ever seen. It might not be the best looking, but I can assure you, it will be the best tasting one. And if you're as bad as I am at decorating cakes, you can always get your wife or your girlfriend to help you out a bit. Alright, there you go. My recipe for my ultimate chocolate cake. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. Comment below what you think I should make next. Like this video, subscribe. We'll see you guys soon. Thanks for watching. And don't mind me eating this entire cake by myself tonight.